Hey all, welcome back to Brushing Up with Sean. I am gonna help you paint mountains just like this coming right up. Alright everybody, let's get started on this painting here. I got you nice and close up so you can really see some detail. We're gonna be making some real distant clouds for our first steps. We're gonna take one of our larger size brushes and we're gonna go ahead and make some very light blue. We're gonna go ahead and mix some white and just a little bit of blue together. And we're going to go ahead and make this a very light blue backdrop. I'm going to start off with our furthest thing back, which is going to be our sky. All right. The reason why we start with the furthest thing back is so we don't have to outline every single little detail. We layer right on top of this. All right, I'm just going to put some more on here. I'm starting with a real light blue because later on we're going to be adding a lot more darker colors as we come forward in our painting here. We're going to add these different layers. Layer. All right, and I don't need to really fill up some of this. I'm just kind of just doing this whole little area right here. I don't need to waste too much paint. Just adding that nice blue. A little bit of powdery blue. And I've got my large size brush here just so I can put some paint on here pretty quickly. There you go. Now you can do up and down, side to side. Just want to make it a nice evenness on here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some real faint clouds. I'm going to do that by adding some nice plain white on my brush, and all I'm going to do is take that same brush and just kind of in a circular motion just dab or blot some of this paint here. And look what it does. It adds a fun texture, so much different, it stands out. And I took just a little bit of white and I'm just extending it out as far as I can. I'm breaking up some of that original sky, just making it look a little bit more interesting in the back. Texturizing it, having some fun. Remember, every sky's different, every cloud's different in the sky, so don't worry about being a perfectionist. Try to let that go. All right, so take a look. Just by doing some simple dabs, simple twists with my brush there, you can see that we've got some nice bit of texture just flowing on there. In fact, if you want, you can see you can add more highlights to your clouds. But again, you don't need to spend a whole lot of time on them because we're going to be covering up some of this shortly. Just a nice distant backdrop there. So there is a little bit of depth. You can see it's just very, very light. We're going to go ahead and switch our brushes though. I want you to go ahead and find your medium to smaller size brush. And we're going to make a little bit more of a darker blue. Now you can take a little bit more of your plain blue and just mix that up into that light blue that you already had for your sky. And we're going to make some distant mountains. Now let's practice this again. Let's go ahead and make some triangles. All right. Just some distant triangles here. Whoa. I've got 3 triangles. I'm going to make another guy right here. And maybe another one here. So I've got these kind of fun little triangles going right there. I'm going to go ahead and take some more of that blue and just paint them in. It's okay if you go outside the lines a little bit. No problem. We're going to do something with that anyway here. Again, we're filling in our nice mountains with some of that light blue. There you go. Now we know mountains aren't perfect pyramids, so we're going to go ahead and take that same brush, add some more of that blue. What I want you to do is kind of maybe like blot or dab, tapering down some of your mountainsides here. I'm just kind of blotting or dabbing that brush just a little bit down each side of the mountain peaks. And what that does is that creates a texture that we really want, a little bit more realism now. Check out what that does. That adds a new effect to your mountains. It's okay if there's imperfections, we want that. Look at that. Look at how that works. Just a simple step, but man, it's so effective. It is so effective. Now we're gonna go ahead and put a little bit more white on that same brush, and we're gonna kind of just soften these mountains out down below. We're gonna take some of that blue, and we're just gonna kind of blend it in. See, I got a little bit of white on my brush, and I'm just kind of softening it down here, just so it looks like it's a little bit highlighted. It's not so bold and everything down there. Nice. Oh yeah. Almost looks like there's a kind of a haze or a fog down below. All right, you can see, we'll just keep adding a little bit more white on your brush. And you can add a little bit more of that light blue. Check this light blue, this powdery light blue, like kind of like what you had with your sky. I'm going to take some more of that and just kind of go back and forth, side to side. Bring some down here. All right, look at that. Now it's picking up some of that blue in different areas. That's okay. It's okay if it's a little streaky. It's going to add like kind of a nice shadowy effect. If you want to, you can actually switch back over to your larger size brush. All right, if you want to cover a little bit more, just switch over back to your larger size brush. All right. That makes it a little bit easier to cover more land if you need. Which I do. I've got a pretty good sized canvas, so I'm going to go ahead and take some of that powdery light blue. Look at that. Look at that larger brush. That's going to cover canvas so quickly. So what you can see now is got these distant mountains back there. And I just adding a little bit of snowfall right here. This is kind of a colder mountain you've seen. Now, what I want to do is add some pretty cool highlights into these mountains while I'm just having fun with them, still working on the background here. So I'm going to take some plain white on my small or tiny size brush. Find one of your small or tiny size brushes, switch it up here. I've got a little flat brush right there. And I'm going to go ahead and add these little bit of streaks, almost like these little tiger stripes again, coming down this mountain here. And I'm just gonna break up some of that blue and really just make this fun effect. Now you can use, different tools. I'm using a smaller brush, and we'll get into tools a little bit later in some of the episodes, but at least I want to show you that there are some interesting textures going on now with these distant mountains. And it just adds a little bit of interest to these. Okay, it adds a little bit more fun. We practiced this with the other mountains that we made on our previous show. Same technique, just a little bit smaller though, smaller streaks, because we're looking at pretty distant mountains back here, but it's got some fun snowfall, little highlights back down there. Oh yeah. We got this. You got this. Now this one's a little bit bigger of a mountain, so you might see a little bit more snow. A little bit more up close at least. And I'm just bringing some of these streaks right over. And you can see, just make your little mountains. This takes a little bit of practice, you know that. We've been working on these a little bit, and we're gonna keep working on our mountains in so many different ways. But I really love when you can, you know, kind of chop up these mountains, show some of this highlight on here. It's okay if some of the highlights are on the other side too, no big deal. Just makes it look a little bit more covered up. Remember, if you add too much of that highlight effect on there, you can just take a little bit more of your powdery blue that you made and just cover that right up. Again, acrylic paint is so awesome, so user-friendly. I have such a fun time with it because you can do so much with it so quickly. All right, and you can see I'm just breaking up maybe some of those plateaus down here, just adding some bigger streaks of that white. You can do that. Since that paint has started to dry, you can add some, maybe some plateaus, maybe some land here. Give it a little bit of depth. Maybe it almost kind of looks like shadowing. It's all an illusion. And it takes a little time. Again, you can kind of almost hear that brush. It's dry, but it's just I'm taking the rest of what I have left off on it there and adding it just beautifully. Look at all that. That is a bright painting so far. And you can see, like, even some of these clouds have started to dry. If you want, you can add maybe some little highlights in them. Just dab a little bit of plain white. They're already starting to dry on us. So you can see this new layer of white is like, wow, so impactful. And I'm just blotting, dabbing very randomly, no rhyme or reason to it. Just adding some random little highlights maybe in these clouds. Look at that. You can always kind of go back and forth, have fun with your sky and everything, but now we want to make it a little bit more interesting. Now I want to have a little bit of fun with some darker close-up mountains. You can see I've got all of this land right here, and you're like, what the heck should we do there? Well, I'm going to show you. We're gonna have some fun with this here. I want to go ahead and make kind of a really dark blue. So what I'm going to do is take that blue. You can see it's already really light right now, but I want to darken it up. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of black on my brush into some of my blue and just kind of make this really dark blue over here. Now this one's going to cover up. We're going to go ahead and add a lot of paint. I got my big brush out again. This is a 3-inch brush, so I don't know if you need something that big, but it is pretty good size. But I'm going to add some larger mountains. You're like, oh my gosh, what did you just do? Don't worry. We're gonna have some fun here. I'm gonna add these close-up mountains. That's what I'm doing. Now you can see some of that paint turn a little bit of light because I had some of that light paint there. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more black on my brush. Wow. Now look at that. Again, we're only really using 3 colors, blue, black, and white, but look at all the stuff you can do with it. Okay, we'll bring some of this down. And we'll just kind of chop it up as we go down here. We're going to kind of leave some a little choppy. And I'm going to add a little bit more black onto my brush as we get closer to this corner edge. And you can see they're starting to get some layers of these blues and blacks here. Now look at that, plain blacks come up, boom. It's gonna blend a little bit because I'm using this big brush. Again, pretty big brush strokes because I'm covering a lot of canvas really quickly. And let's go ahead and add some darker paint right there in the corner. Now, believe it or not, that is actually starting to dry, because that is acrylic paint for you. Pretty impressive stuff. Okay, but we've got some really dark right there. Now I'm gonna go ahead and set that big brush down. I'm not gonna need that right now. What I am gonna do is add maybe some of these little rocks. Okay, some darker little areas here. Maybe some little shadows with a little bit of that dark blue or plain black. Okay, I'm just gonna add maybe some little bit of rocks down here. And just little dabs of this color. I didn't want to use the big brush because that's too big, so you can kind of use the smaller brushes or your medium-sized brushes. But what you want to do is, this is starting to get a little bit more in the detail here. You can add these little bit of hills and rocks off your mountain here. Again, that paint is already starting to dry. I can feel it already. And I'm just adding another little beauty right there. Very random. No rhyme or reason for any of this here. It's just we want to kind of add that nice bit of texture. You want to kind of see that there are at least some shadowing down here in your mountain. So you can take a little bit of your darker blue. It's almost black, and you can see maybe I'm just making some shadows in this mountain right here. Yeah. Again, layering and texturizing really helps with your paintings. It really does an amazing job when you add all these different layers. Even the slightest little hiccup or bump can add such a fun little thing to your painting. Just adds a little bit more each time. Now, I've seen artists do tons of layers. I mean, we're talking like lots and lots of layers. We don't need to do that many. We're just gonna do a few. But you can see you got some actual shadowing now happening in here, just because I added a little bit of stuff just to break it up. But again, really, this is such a cold kind of exterior of a painting. So we want to start adding some kind of fun texture to it. And that's going to be in the form of some snow. Again, we want to add maybe a light blue. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and make our light blue. A little bit of blue into some white. Now it's going to start changing here because we are bringing some highlights up into and breaking up some of this mountain. That blue is going to change a little bit. All right, it's going to have a tough time because it's like going against that darker color. But you can see, look at your highlights now, are changing the actual feel of this painting. Bring some of that blue down here. Look at that. Your light blue, because acrylic paint dries very quickly, is already starting to really just take over some of that black. Now it turns a little bit of a kind of a grayish blue. All right, don't worry, you can just add more highlights to change that. But what you want to do is break up some of that, add that texture, that nice bit of texture. You can see I'm just very randomly adding some of these highlights. Some of these clusters of highlights are a little bit thicker, some are a little bit thinner, and they are making all these different marks. You can even dab or blot. Now, if you feel comfortable using maybe like a smaller size brush, feel free to do that. You can switch it up. All right, add some streaks up here. Now it looks like we've got some pretty cool highlights happening on this mountain. And I'm just gonna keep going. I'm gonna break up some of this here a little bit more and show you a couple more steps on this. Put a nice wintry, out in the mountains painting that we're doing. Now you can see if you want some brighter highlights, a little bit more bright, you can add just a little bit of plain white on your brush, and look at that. Look at that go. Just a little bit. Don't need a lot, but it adds a whole new feel. And I'm just using a flat brush, guys, too. I'm just giving you a heads up. I'm using a flat brush, using the edge of it. Find the brush that works for you, though. I've used many different ones. You can just find whatever works easiest for you. So you can see we've got that. I'm going to add maybe some highlights down here just to even some of those spikes out. Now, what I like to do is really add some of that, you know, detail work. You know, add little dashes and dabs. So I'm taking my tiny size brush and just adding maybe some highlights on top of those highlights, just to add the effect that there is quite a bit of texture. You start adding those finer lines, that makes it look like you're a little bit up close, a little bit more realism happening. You can see there is a difference now compared to these ones here, so I'm going to add a little bit more here. And really, we're doing it pretty fast, but you can, you know, take your time on this. Take your time. Add your different textures. Every mountain is so different. And we've got these little bumps down here too. We want to add some kind of fun. Add some, maybe some little bit of snow on there, just by dabbing some of that little bit of white. And that adds kind of a fun bit of highlights on those rocks that are kind of peeking through. So there you go. This is the painting that we wanted to kind of show you, at least with working with some distant mountains. You can see that they're definitely a little bit lighter with their color. Okay, and then we came up and we got, you know, we got our clouds in the background. We went back and highlighted a few if you want to. And then we really came into this big mountain right up front here, just to show off what you can really do with your up close highlights and lowlights. But you can see it got a little bit darker. The mountain got darker as we got closer. And that's what you kind of want to do. Is it gives you the illusion, it gives you a lot of depth now. You can see there's so much depth in this painting. But it's just a fun one. Hope you guys enjoy this show here. Keep tuning in to Brushing Up with Sean. Tell your friends and like us on Instagram, Facebook, and we'll keep shelling these out at you guys, man. I'm gonna bring you tons of paintings. We're gonna learn all this together. We're gonna have a good time together, all right? Take care, guys. Bye.